welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West, host of the show that focuses on value, and our guest today is John Henry Brown, retired New York City school teacher and presently instructor at Teachers College, Columbia in New York City. Hello, John. Welcome for being on the show.
Judith.
Okay, so just to set the background a little bit, you taught for 32 years in the New York City school system.
Yes.
In the city?
In the
What
city.
level?
Well, my first 5.5 years were in a junior high school in the South Bronx,
Okay.
and then 25.5 years at the High School of Art and Design.
Oh, okay.
And while I was doing that, I was teaching. I taught 15 years.
At community college,
Community
and now
college.
you're an instructor in what at Teachers College?
English education.
English education. Okay. Well, boy, do we need you. Okay. We invited you to be on the show, John, because you wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times regarding an article that had been in the paper about formulas to measure teacher performance.
Yes.
And it basically takes us back, which was 10 years ago, to the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act. Okay. And in which case, and I want to quote you directly, you write in your letter to the editor that George Bush had his Texas miracle in education, which you say proved to be a fraud. And specifically this article talked about a teacher who got outstanding recommendations and compliments from her principal and her peers, but yet failed this formula that was created as a result of No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of a background about that, but then we want to really move off of that to what else can be done to measure performance of teachers. So give us a little bit of background on that, on your letter to the editor, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. Well, the first about the George Bush and the fraud.
Well, let's just call it No Child Left Behind. Okay.
Okay.
We're nonpartisan on this show.
Okay.
And by the way, it was co-sponsored by
Edward Kennedy.
yes, from the
I
other
know.
side.
I
So,
know.
meantime, let's go on. Go ahead.
Well, I could mention Ron Page, who.
Let's go to what is it about what is it that bothered you the most about this article that
the article
inspired you to
itself.
write the letter to the editor?
Well, when I read the article, and again, this is Stacy Isaacson,
yes.
the article is
who
about.
happened to have been in your class.
Yes, was a student of mine. Yes.
Okay, fine.
And when I read it, I was just enraged.
Okay.
I couldn't believe it.
Because she was an outstanding student.
Yes.
And in fact, her principal and her peers thought she was outstanding, but she was likely to lose her job.
Well, she'd lose her job if perhaps they were able to reverse the seniority thing and also.
But also, she did not get very high rating under the formula
7%,
to perform teachers.
Yeah.
Now, that formula doesn't give a clear picture, says the New York Times article in your letter to her. So tell us a little bit about the background of that formula.
Well, the formula, it's value added measurement, and this is the latest.
All right. So in layman's language, what is value added performance?
Well, they put in, it's supposed to follow each individual student.
Okay.
So in other words, if you're teaching, say, an advanced placement class, they're going to score much better than maybe a lower level 9th grade class. So they put in individual characteristics for the student. If the student has free lunch, if the student
So the student is profiled.
Right.
Okay. Right. And is a teacher's performance based on the level of the student she deals with or he deals with?
Yeah, apparently. Now, no one can really figure out the algorithm. We've had, as you know, we've had trouble with algorithms.
We have trouble with lots of things. Algorithms, one of them. Okay. That is, figuring out exactly how the formula and its variables work. Okay.
Yeah. So it's fed in, and all of these things are fed in, and it comes out with a percentage.
Okay. All right. And then so in basically speaking, since you know her directly, you taught her, and this woman, we don't want to focus on her, and there are others like Miss Isaacson in the article, basically, you're disagreeing with how these teachers are measured. And then furthermore, you say something like, and if seniority is overturned, that she could, even if she was really good, she could still lose her job, or he could still lose a job. Okay,
Yeah.
So let's focus on the two things. Is it fair to say that there's a fairly united consensus in this country that something has happened to education in this country? and if you want to judge by the product, graduation rates, our tests compared to other countries, the things that we usually use to judge performance.
Well, there's somewhat of a bifurcation there because within underserved, underprivileged communities, obviously the education is not serving them well. It's
Okay.
not. But when you're dealing with, and it goes, if you're dealing with an affluent suburban community, that's a different story.
All right, but we have a value in this country that's richly ingrained, and as a matter of fact, guaranteed by law, that there should be equal opportunity for all kids without regard to their zip code.
Yeah, well, there's supposed
And as
to
a
be.
matter of fact, No Child Left Behind was intended to throw some sunshine into the achievement gap that you yourself talk about between privileged kids
Right, exactly.
and less privileged
Yes.
kids economically or by family status. So as Americans, don't we have to do something about that?
We have to do something about it, and I think, for example, Jeffrey Canada has done something
let's-
about
yeah,
it.
okay.
But I'm just talking about a solution
okay.
with it, with underprivileged.
So that's a particular charter school that has done something about that on its own.
Yeah, but the approach is a holistic approach. They have psychologists, they have social workers, they have classes for parents. It is dealing with the whole child, which
But there's also something different about the teaching staff at charter schools. Is there not? They don't belong to a union. Principals have more leeway to reassign them. There's more flexibility in their work day. After all, they can bring kids in on Saturdays and force them to work. How much of it comes back to the classroom teacher's performance?
Well, obviously, that is extremely important. The thing is, what we're talking about is how do you measure that performance?
Okay.
Also, charter schools have been, despite Waiting for Superman, that movie, which actually indicates in the movie, have performed just as well, sometimes a little better, sometimes a little worse than public schools.
Yeah, they have some are better and some are not as good.
Yeah.
Just as like there's different kinds of public schools too.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a major problem with privatizing public education, but that's
But
another issue.
let's stay focused on teacher performance.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about measuring teacher performance. Do we measure teacher performance by a test that students take where they're bubbling in answers? The test is similar to the test I'm sure you have taken, I've taken when we were kids, the same thing. A test that I don't really know what it measures. The students in New York City were doing incredibly well until a year ago when they recalibrated the scores.
All right. So, and that is true. So
Yeah.
let's go even further now. After all, most folks agree that there is a need to certainly jumpstart performance in urban schools and for the underprivileged.
Right.
If it's not a test, John, and most folks agree that a test is not a perfect tool, but if it's not a test, what ought it to be?
Well, it needs to be a multi-flanked approach.
Consisting of what?
Well, let me give you an example. There is Linda Darling Hammond, who was one of the chief advisors for Obama during his run on education. And she was up for the job that now Arnie Duncan has.
All right, well, what is a substitute for testing?
Well, a substitute, the testing is just this narrow.
Okay, we agree.
Yeah.
So
Well,
tell us what you would substitute, what alternatives you would put.
Classroom practice.
You mean observation?
Well, it could be multiple pronged. You have standards. You examine the standards. Also, depending on where the teacher happens to be. It's very different if a teacher's there for 1, 2, 3 years, and when you move into tenure and beyond. You can deal with peer review. You can create portfolio of work that has been created.
When you talk about review, first thing I want to bring back to mind, yes, it's true. I mean, experience is valuable, the right kind of experience. And a 1-, and 2-, and 3-year teacher hasn't perhaps hit his or her stride.
Not at all.
Unfortunately, the kids are going through those 1 and 2 and 3
Right.
years. And certainly it's fair for anyone to say, should they be subject to OJT, on the job training? That's one thing that we have to deal with. And then also peer review and principal review. Is how judgmental is that? Is that something that would hold up to the tests of a gold standard?
Well, you're dealing with a human, it can't be so simplified. You're dealing with something that is very messy. You're dealing with adolescents, you're dealing with principals, you're dealing with teachers,
Agreed.
you're dealing with...
The waters are very muddy.
Right.
So what do we do as taxpayers and caring Americans? If, as you say, No Child Left Behind is not doing its job, and of course No Child Left Behind is in itself kind of an oxymoron. No one thinks no child could ever be left behind.
Well,
but what do you do? Did it not at least put some sunshine into the fact that there is this big achievement gap, and that we are, as American taxpayers, spending more and more and more money on educating kids and getting poorer and poorer results?
Well, we have to spend more money.
Do you think money's the answer, John?
Well, I think it's the answer going back again to the Harlem Children's Zone. I think that's, if we want to change things, turn things around, we have to have this holistic approach.
What is the single one thing that money would bring to the table that's lacking now in the public school system?
It would bring services. When I finished my teaching, my last year of teaching, it was very painful because you're dealing with so many students who are in crisis.
Yes.
And especially in English, you're finding out about abuse, you're finding about suicidal thoughts, and there was no place to send them. And these kids are coming in with multiple problems that we can't even consider. So
you're really talking about all the ancillary problems that revolve around interfering with the kids' learning.
Right, on site.
Okay, right, yeah.
And it's going to cost money, but we're not going to do it.
We have about 1 minute left. Within all of that, how would you solve, just in a minute, and it's a very, well, so we have, how would you solve this seniority versus young teachers that are all full of enthusiasm, like Teaching for American Fellows and things? How would you keep them in the schools? We need those kids. Don't all corporations need new blood?
Oh, absolutely. But as we mentioned before, the first 2 years, and this is a problem I have with Teach for America, if they're going to do 2 years, they're doing on-the-job training, and they're not serving people
But isn't
well.
that true? But maybe their on-the-job training is a very valuable kind of teaching to the class. I mean,
it's good training for them? No. I mean, I think you have taught. I taught my first 2 years. I didn't help anybody.
But the reality is that by constantly getting rid of the ones they're teaching for the first 2 or 3 years, we're not doing much to build a bench. All corporations need a bench.
I don't think we necessarily have to get rid of them. There's big debate on Bloomberg and the cuts and politics.
And tenure's all over. However, you really raise a very interesting. We didn't solve it here. That's for sure.
I thought we did.
I know. That's for sure. But this is an ongoing debate again for Americans, and I want to thank you for your thoughts. I read them in your letter, and also for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much.
So this discussion will be continued beyond us, beyond our tenure. I'm Judith West. You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. Thanks for watching.